Welcome to Mediumship Moments with Kym Durham. Join her as she shares her personal journey with mediumship, connects with your loved ones, and discusses topics dealing with spirituality.
Welcome back, everybody, to Mediumship Moments with your host, me, Kym Durham, psychic medium. Today, I'd like to highlight a missing persons case I worked on. I work on murder cases of missing persons throughout the United States, actually throughout the world. I've worked on a case in Guam and Italy, but mostly in the United States. And I work with local, state, and federal authorities, helping them using my psychic and mediumship ability to give them pieces to the puzzle that they can put together. Psychically, when I work on a case, I like to hold on to objects that person had held on to, whether that's a ring, key fob. Metal really retains energy. And I can see pages within the chapter of that person's life. So metal is my preferred substance that I'd like to hold on. I've held on to clothing, shoes, a hat. And I find that now I can do this from my studio. So they may ship things to me for me to hold on to and to then record. And I draw pictures, if you will. For me, I schematically put together the crime scene. And my mediumship ability allows me to do that because I mold with the missing person or the cold case individual by seeing through their eyes, if you will. And I will describe the crime scene, the suspects, and it's kind of like seeing pages within a chapter of this person's life. I wanted to highlight a case that I worked on of a young man. His name is Andrew Jarek. He was a young man in his later 20s. I believe he was 27. And he was living in Hoboken, New Jersey with a couple of roommates. And he truly was just an amazing young man from how his family and friends described him. Now, how did this case come to me? Well, my mother, as I had commented on, was a world-renowned psychic medium and was just amazing on her case file. She had over 240 murder or missing persons cases that I have documentation of. Andrew Jarek's aunt came to my studio and she brought three things to me. She brought a photograph. She brought his mortar from graduation from high school and I believe some kind of athletic shirt. And so I sat with her and held on to these things and used my psychic and mediumship ability. Now, I never, ever want to take hope away from anyone. But when I sat with the aunt who was, if you will, vetting me, because she had been a client of my mom's, but at that time my mom had crossed. And so they had heard about me and wanted to see if I could help. So when I sat down with his items, I started to pick up those pictures that I see and started to draw things. And I remember hearing a young man come forward. I could sense him. He started to tell me about a birthday party that he attended, that he was there. I was there. I was there. And so with the information that I gave the aunt, she went back to the family and said, she's the real deal, meaning me. And I think we should bring her up to help find Andrew. Now, Andrew had been out the night before with some friends having a good time, as we all tend to do. He was seen that night trying to gain entrance, they believe, into his townhouse that he may have forgotten or lost his keys. A witness had reported seeing him fall off a shed on the back. There was witnesses that had seen him walking about town. Now, when the aunt sat with me and she said about coming up, I was contacted by his brother. And I arranged to meet the brother at the townhouse. And so I came up and I had, my paperwork with me because I draw and a recording. And I went to knock on the door. And I heard a young man's voice. Asked my brother about his neck. I told him about my chiropractor is what I heard. And then the door opens. And I turned to the young man and said, "Hi, I'm Kym Durham. I'm here to help on the case." And then as I walked into the townhouse, I asked the brother, I said, "How's your neck feeling?" And he looked at me And I said, weren't you just at the chiropractor? And he kind of looked startled. And I didn't tell him I could hear someone telling me that. I just wanted to convey something that I was being told. I went into the living room and they had some items that were AJ's there for me to hold on to do that psychometry with. But AJ kept telling me, why bedroom's in the back left there? Come on, I'll show you. When I speak to those that have crossed, I telepathically, which means I don't say it verbally. I kind of say it with my inside voice. Hold on, AJ, I'm going to sit with these items. And while I was sitting there with the items and I was holding on to a watch, his lanyard, and some other items, and I started to see these impressions, those pictures I told you about. So I started to draw pictures and I started to hear AJ say a few things to me, and I scribbled those down and we recorded it. And AJ at that time had been missing a week. And this was in 2014. So after I did the psychometry, I wanted to sense his energy in the house. And I already had, but he was chatting with me so much. Come here, I want to show you my room. And I'm like, okay. And so I started walking down the hallway. I said, I'm headed to his room. And the brother turned and said, well, how do you know where his room is? Because there was 3 bedrooms in the townhouse. And I didn't tell him AJ was showing me. Again, I never want to take hope away. So after I took a peek in his room and sufficed AJ, and we have to go, I was feeling a pull, and quite literally, it was like AJ was tugging on my shirt. Come on, let's go. I got out of the townhouse and I started to walk. And I just felt a pull towards this direction. Now, when I work on a case, I never want to know anything. I started to walk and I ended up replicating the same path he had taken, which were the 5 blocks over to the riverside or the walkway along the Hudson River. How I knew that I had replicated his steps is that Hoboken had these cameras throughout. 10 of those cameras weren't working, and that they saw it off of grainy other cameras. And the family was frustrated that the cameras weren't working because they would have been extremely helpful in the actual path. They did document that I walked the same way. And a side note, it caused a difficult time for the mayor at the time of Hoboken to explain why those cameras weren't working. And it was, I believe, a budgetary cut from what I understood at the time. So I headed down the path, drawing pictures and hearing him speak to me. I walked along the path and he kept showing me an image in my head. And it's kind of like seeing a movie unfold, except I'm not in the scene yet. I've got to match what's in my head to where I am physically. And so I was being pulled along those 5 blocks towards the water. And I kept being shown a thin building and then a walkway, kind of like a dock leading out to the water. So I'm heading down south, down the walkway, and I come upon that building that I can see that matches what I'm being shown in my head, if you will. Now, the problem is that there was construction going on. And so all of it had 6-foot fencing around it. I couldn't get past to see exactly what was there unless I went over the fence. Now, something they'll teach you or they don't teach you in nursing, there's a saying in nursing, best to ask for forgiveness instead of permission. I decided to take it upon myself. I looked around, there's no popo, and I climbed the fence, got over to the other side, started to proceed down this dock area where that brown, thin building was that I was seeing the picture in my head. Got past that, and it was like an epiphany. It was like, like all of a sudden, I now could see the building to my right, the walkway, dock in front of me, and the river in front of that. So I got down to the side of the dock and I started drawing pictures. I started to draw an X and I started to, like a circle with an X in it, like X marks the spot. And then I kept drawing 17. And I kept looking in the water. And there was an assistant with me at the time, someone taking notes. and documenting all of this. And I kept telling them, he's here. He's here. And I was told, well, the divers have been out in several locations and they had an aerial search and he hadn't been found. After that search, we had gone out for a bite to eat and I was with the brother, I believe his wife, would have been AJ's sister-in-law. And we sat and we talked. And I said, my feeling is that you will find him in a very short period of time. And I told them at that time, I felt he had crossed. I could see him walking across those 5 blocks. And again, I didn't know anything, but I saw him kind of running. And here he was a runner. In fact, he was training for a marathon at the time. And apparently he had gained access into his apartment. I truly don't know if the roommate let him in or if he was able to kind of break in, but he actually had changed clothes and came out running. So when I sat with the brother and talked about everything, decompressing from it, because I can only imagine, the brother just looked exhausted, and so did the sister-in-law. And having someone missing, that ache, where are they? Are they safe? Can I find them? Those 7 sleepless nights. And so I talked to the brother about what I had seen and how we could move forward with this and, my impressions of what I was sensing and how they could utilize that information. So fast forward, they took my drawings and used them. And the spot where I was, right there on the dock, and the number that I had written, 17, was exactly where AJ's body was found 17 days later. I was happy that they were able to bring him home. As the nurse, a mom, and a medium, I know grieving doesn't actually begin until you have their remains, and then hopefully healing follows. So that was a case that I worked with, and there's cases that stick with you. AJ was just the salt of the earth kind of guy. He was the light of the family, and he is dearly, dearly missed. They're still asking, well, why did he do this? Why did he do this? And I truly felt it was an accident. I can't say that he fell in. I don't feel that there was anything untoward or anyone pushed him in. I truly felt that it was an accident. It's one of those cases that, like I said, sticks with me. They actually started a memorial golf tournament in his honor, which ran for, I believe, 10 years. They described him as always having a smile on his face and that he just enjoyed every aspect of his life. And like I said, this case sticks close to my heart. And I was forever grateful that the family trusted in my ability. It is difficult when I sit with family. Obviously, when I work with the authorities, there's that less of an emotional connection. The mission statement at PSI, Psychic Studies and Investigations, which the business my mom started over 50 years ago, the mission statement is there, but for the grace of God, go I. And so I hope that my ability to find him in some way brought that healing. So now I'd like to leave you with a mediumship moment. I'm sure we all have mediumship moments, whether you see a sign of a loved one, let's say a cardinal flies and sits right down on the bench sitting next to you, and that reminds you of your grandmother. That's your mediumship moment. You don't need a medium to validate it. But I want to talk about a session I just had recently on Zoom. So I had a client, she was an only daughter, and we started the mediumship session. And right away, this young guy, just jacked, I'll say, with a mustache, in army fatigues, is holding up a blue and a yellow flag. Well, because of what has been going over in Russia and Ukraine, I recognized the flag right away. And I said, your father's crossed? And she said, yes. I said, he's from Ukraine. Oh my God, how did you know that? I said, well, he's standing here. I said, he was in army fatigues. He was in the army? Yes, he was. And so he came forward and showed me things that his daughter was doing in life. He was so very proud of her starting a business. And then the next thing I know, another woman came in and she was quite annoyed at the father for chatting too long. And she grabbed the microphone. Well, here it was this young lady's mom. And the mother came forward and shared some loving messages, talked about the ring. And here the daughter was wearing it at the time, and I described it. And then she said, I love the photograph in the gold frame. Well, here, sitting next to the client, she had just put together this two-framed that kind of folds in together, and it was gold, and it had a picture of her mom and a prayer that was Ukrainian. So every day, I'm blessed that I have a mediumship moment. And like I said, if a cardinal resonates with you, a butterfly or a ladybug, I hope you all have a mediumship moment too.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time for another episode of Mediumship Moments. If you enjoyed this episode of Kim's podcast, check her out on Instagram and TikTok at Kym Durham Medium.